8 goals in the playoffs. Down low for Perry. How many big goals has he scored in Stanley Cup playoff action? One-timer scores! Dino Gurianov has sent Dallas to the Stanley Cup Finals!
Just heard Chris Cuthbert's call of Denis Gurianov's overtime goal, which sent the Dallas Stars to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2000. Welcome to Puck Buds, everybody. So how did Dallas win the West in 5 games over Vegas? What's fueling Tampa's success, and might it be time to trade Steven Stamkos ahead of an offseason salary crunch? Of course, he's missed the entire playoffs, and as of recording, they're 1 win away from a date with the Stars. And what about the Bruins? A lot of tough decisions for Bees GM Don Sweeney. We'll answer all of this, but first, the headlines. The Washington Capitals have named their new head coach, and it's a familiar face for hockey fans, Peter Laviolette. Laviolette has coached 3 teams in his career, leading each to the finals, winning it with the Hurricanes in 2006. Most recently, he was fired by Nashville back in January as the team sat in 6th place in the Central Division. This will be the 7th coach Alex Ovechkin has played for in his career, but only the 2nd who took over with prior head coaching experience. The other, Barry Trotz, led Washington to their first and only Stanley Cup championship in 2018. The date of the NHL draft has been scheduled, and like most in-person things in 2020, it will be done virtually on October 6th and 7th. The New York Rangers will have the first overall selection, and all signs are pointing to them drafting left-winger Alexis Lafreniere at number 1. Senators, Kings, and Red Wings will also be selecting at the top of what many are considering to be a very deep draft. It's award season. And some, like the Stars on Monday night, seeing their trophy shelves get a little bit bigger. Nathan MacKinnon took home the Lady Byng, given annually to the player who displays excellence in both on-ice performance and sportsmanship. And the Flyers' Sean Couturier was given the Selke for league's best two-way forward. Not a lot of controversy in those selections, but one that did spark debate was the Coach of the Year. It was Bruce Cassidy who received the honors, beating out Philadelphia's Alain Vigneault and Columbus's John Tortorella. We'll talk about Cassidy's win when we get into the Bruins, but first, we've got to talk about the Stars. Dallas defeated Calgary in 6, before taking out Colorado in 7, and then, in the last series, Vegas in 5. Not many people were predicting them to represent the West when the bracket was announced. So, Dylan, are you surprised it's the Stars awaiting the winner of Tampa in New York?
Yeah, I mean, geez, I didn't pick them, nor would they have been in my probably top 3. At no point during the season did I consider them to be in that elite tier. I heard some people say that they, for them, qualified for that level, but I never quite saw them in that really upper echelon of teams in the NHL. I thought they were decent, but yeah, never saw them as a serious threat. I guess you could say they were one of my dark horses heading into the playoffs because I did think they had potential, but no, I would say this is definitely taking my expectations to another level. I think they're just having players step up at the right time. They're getting production from both offense and D. Heiskanen, he's a defenseman. He leads the team in points with over a point a game. He has 22 points in 21 games. And then Klingberg has 16, which is that's 3rd on the team. So Heiskanen, Ben, Gurianov, Klingberg. Those are your top 4, 2 forwards and 2 D. So really getting a lot of contributions, and can't forget Anton Khudobin either, who I always thought was a pretty solid NHL backup at least, but he's proving that he has potential to be more than that.
Yeah, so I would say for me, it wasn't at the beginning of the season. I wouldn't have been shocked if you told me that Dallas was going to go to the finals, only because I looked at sort of what St. Louis did last year, and I sort of thought that Dallas had a little bit of similarities. They're built by defense and a solid goalie, but I was thinking that when with Ben Bishop in the net, and they leaned on Ben Bishop so much last year, and he's been, when he's healthy and he's one of the best goalies in the league. So I guess with Khudobin in the net, I was a little bit surprised. But sort of when I look at teams that sort of make a run or win the cup, there's sort of three things that a lot of them really have in common. They're built from the back end, like I just said. They're strong defensively, whether that's because they're physical or because they're long. The ice can't be easy to come by. I look at depth up the middle at the center position. This is particularly stands out with Pittsburgh in 2016 and 2017 when you got shooting Crosby, Malkin, and then Nick Bonino, 1, 2, 3. I mean, just do the math. You're never going to have an easy time on the ice if one of those guys is
Yeah,
out there.
Hagelin, Bonino, and Kessel on that third line.
Yeah, I mean, sort of leads me to the other point. My third one is solid above average play from the entire forward group. When it's the defense, or when it's the postseason, and defenses are watching the film and preparing the game plan, who do you prepare for? You're going to look at their best players. Everyone sort of always says like, "Oh, in the playoffs, your best player needs to be your best player," and I don't really think that's the case because when their best player is studying who to stop, they're going to look at your best player, and odds are that's going to cancel out. But when you look at Dallas, who do you prepare for? They don't have any superstars on the team. I mean, the closest guy is Tyler Seguin. And if you had to say one guy who's been a disappointment out of anybody this playoffs, it's been Tyler Seguin. So they're getting consistent goal scoring from lines 1, 2, and 3, and I just don't know how you prepare for that. And that's why I think right now, as we head into the Stanley Cup Final, they're sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny what you said about your best player having to be your best player. I've always thought that's a stupid term too, because anyone can pick up the slack. It's not like your team's completely in a huge hole because one guy's not producing. No, other guys can pick them up. So, in principle, I understand what it's saying, but it's just not applicable in all cases because it's not always true. Like Sagan, he has 8 points, and if your best player really needed to be your best player, then how would the Stars be in the Cup final?
Exactly. I mean, who are you're looking at the Stars? Who are you going to prepare for? I mean, when you got Radulov on your top line, Radulov and Ben, who are both Conn Smythe candidates. Then you got Dennis Goryanov. I couldn't tell you how many goals that guy has, but a lot. And then you got Rupe Hintz and Kivarenka, the new folk hero, on the third line. I mean, and if you just look at what they've done in getting overtime goals, for example, they've gotten 4 overtime goals this playoffs. 2 from Radulov's, 1 from Kivarenka, and 1 from Gurionov. That's a guy from line 1, a guy from line 2, and a guy from line 3. It's like if you shut down the first line for one game, then you got to deal with the second or the third line, and then if you focus on the second line, it's the first and third. It's just a team that's front loaded. I mean, a team that is just so loaded at the top. It's like that's who they're gonna focus on. But when you don't know who's going to kill you at any single night, you become an extremely deadly team.
I've always thought the teams that don't have depth, to me, they're like a house of cards. And I look at them as a structure that's so frail that could give in at any point because all it takes is one guy to struggle. And then the rest of the team, they can't keep up. You know, if they're not deep, then if those few top guys struggle, then it's like that house of cards falls apart. And it's like it's just unsustainable a lot of the
Well,
time. So the
yeah,
teams that find the most playoff success, they really have 4 lines that can go.
yeah. Like what I was gonna say was, I mean, look at Edmonton. I mean, look at Edmonton. Edmonton has, you could say, 2 of the top 5 best players in the whole league. And what are the Blackhawks doing? They're saying we got to stop McDavid. 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 We got to stop Drysdale. And obviously that's easier said than done. But if you have somewhat of a success doing that, it's a long series. And if you have any sort of success, it's like who else is going to pick up the slack? And there there just wasn't anybody. There just wasn't anybody to pick up the slack, and that's why they lost to what do you call it, an inferior Chicago team? I would say that, but
I
it's
would.
like, yeah, it's like I think the teams that don't have the superstars, that aren't built on just star talent, like the teams that aren't the Toronto Maple Leafs, those are the ones that are able to go far in the playoffs because they have a lot of guys who their names don't jump off the page, but when rubber hits the road, They're the guys that are making the plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. And it's funny how you mentioned Edmonton because that was exactly who I was kind of subconsciously talking about. It wasn't really, it was the first team I was thinking of. I wasn't directly talking about them, but whenever I use that House of Cards analogy, I'm always talking about the Oilers because that's just how I see them as an unsustainable team, at least for now. And
Well,
I think that applies to a lot of other teams around the NHL. But no, the Stars have that depth that you really need for playoff success.
yeah, they're front loaded. They're loaded with a bunch of superstars, and they have a weak defense. And the old saying, "Defense wins championships." That's so true too. I mean, against Vegas, Vegas couldn't. The Golden Knights couldn't score. They just couldn't score. So they gave up 0 goals, 3 goals, which was their loss, 2 goals, one, and then two in game five. For people that aren't good at math like myself, that's 1.6 goals per game that they're averaging, that they're letting up. If you allow your opponents to score 1.6 goals per game, you're going to win. Doesn't matter if you don't have the big guns offensively. If the other team can't score goals, they aren't going to win. It's as simple as that. And it's like this I said as simple as that, and Dallas has sort of figured that out.
Yeah, that's what we see out of teams that typically can make it to the cup final is that they win those low scoring games and they try to limit those offensive run and gun style games because those are just too unpredictable. They like to use their system and win really by defense and then working from their net out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a lot like St. Louis last year. I mean, St. Louis, if they got a lead, they just went into complete they just went into complete defensive shutdown, and they would not let you gain the offensive zone. And Dallas hasn't really has shown the ability to come back. You didn't necessarily see from St. Louis. I guess that wasn't their calling card of them winning the cup, but it's still the
They,
same.
they did
This
have a good comeback against who was it? It was oh, I can't remember. It was that controversial goal that was
against
scored in
San Jose.
overtime. San Jose, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just. I mean, the Stars have made a living based on coming back this playoffs. Don't necessarily think that was
Yeah,
how
yeah, I
St.
know what you
Louis
mean.
ended up winning the cup, but it was
Yeah, it
both. They
wasn't the
both.
legacy.
Yeah, there just was. There's just not a lot of room out there against Dallas. I mean, just looking at their top two pairing defensemen. I mean, Miro Heiskanen, like you said, he's been elite. I mean, he's got to be. Would you say he's the favorite for the Conn Smythe? I mean, I probably would.
I would say so.
And playing with Alexiak, who's huge, big physical guy. And then on the top, you got Essa Lindell. He's turning into a stud. And then you got Klingberg. Klingberg might be a little soft, but he's still pretty long, and he's good at
Yeah.
breakouts. So when you got
You know
those
what?
two guys, I mean, those two pairings. It's like that's tough. That's
You know
tough.
what they say about Klingberg is his forte. What makes him unique is he likes those high shots from the point, and a lot of the times they're wrist shots because you're told shoot low hard shots for those rebounds, but he tends to shoot high and just kind of loft them in, and his teammates know it's coming, so they can work that out a lot of the times for a solid tip. And yeah, that's one thing that really makes him unique. He likes to just lob them in nice and high, ready for a tip.
Well, I think providing offense from the back end is obviously a huge help too. I don't think you necessarily need scoring from the back end, but I do think that it's a real help. I mean, Tampa has just gotten excellent offensive production from their defensemen, and it sort of goes back to that you need guys that the team is not expecting to score, and that can be third or fourth liners, or that can be defense. Dallas is getting it from all over, all up and down the lineup, all 22 skaters. Moving on to the team which could very well be the Stars' opponent in the finals. Tampa, we know, is very good and good enough to compete and win the Stanley Cup every year. The team was already going to be in a tough salary cap position before the pandemic. They need to re-sign Anthony Cirelli and Mikhail Sergachev, and with the flat salary cap which is scheduled for next year, they will certainly need to shed some money in order to make that happen. team has $5.3 million in free money right now for next season, and they currently don't have a right shot defenseman on the NHL roster for next year. Eric Chernak is an RFA, while Kevin Shattenkirk and Zach Bogosian are UFAs. Many are assuming Alex Killorn is on the block. Tyler Johnson, Yanni Gourde, or Andre Palat could also be on the move. But to me, there's another guy I think that should be on the move. So Dylan, is it time to trade Steven Stamkos?
No, I just don't see it happening. I just think that would be too much of an unnecessary risk at this point. I definitely don't see Tampa as a Toronto or Washington. I don't see them as one of those teams that can't get it done and is carving their name into a poor legacy. I think this team is still potentially a Stanley Cup winner either now or in the near future. And it's really not that they can't get it done. They're pretty good in the playoffs over the last 10 years. Cooper has a winning record. He's 36 and 32 and has made the playoffs in 5 out of 6 years. Lost in the first round twice, but this is his fourth time making it past the second round. So 4 times making it past round 2. That's something teams like Toronto and Washington struggle to do Tampa's still struggling to do it, and Washington has only been able to do it once in Ovechkin's entire career. So I don't see this team as a team that needs to blow it up and take any kind of unnecessary risk to maybe get themselves over that hump, so to speak. I think if they stay put, they could definitely be a cup winning team in the near future, possibly this year. And I don't see a reason to disrupt this core, because how much could you possibly gain by losing Steven Stamkos? In a trade, you get the net gain, and if you lose Stamkos, that's a lot. That's going to take a lot coming back your way to make that a positive outcome for you. So no, I just don't see a reason to disrupt this core at all.
Well, I think what you're seeing right now going on in the playoffs is the reason why you can't trade him. I mean, they're up 3-2, and without him, he hasn't played a game in the playoffs. I mean, it's not like you're missing any production from him. I mean, really. I mean, I shouldn't. It sounds like I'm sort of disrespecting Stamkos, and I'm not. But Andre Palat has done an admirable job on that top line with Kucherov and Point, and 8 goals this playoffs. I mean, how much more production are you going to be able to get from that top line? And I mean, they have relied on. We just finished talking about all the depth of Dallas, and that's what I think has been the key for Tampa. Palat, Alex Killorn, Yanni Gourde, it's Blake Coleman. And if you have to get rid of a guy, that could mess up the whole chemistry of the whole team. I mean, right now, this is evidence that Tampa can do it without Steven Stamkos. And if you trade either Johnson, Gourde, Palat, or Killorn, you're gonna save like $5 million. So if you save the $5 million, you add it to the 5.3, you got to sign Cirelli and Sergachev, and you would think that they're going to be able to get them on bridge deals, but at the same time, that's Cirelli and Sergachev alone are going to eat up a lot of that $10 million that you project if you trade one of those guys. Stamkos' salary cap is salary hit is $8.5 million. So if you trade him, now that number's up to 13. Now you can get Cirelli. Now you can get Sergachev. Now you can bring back Shattenkirk, who's been great this playoffs. You can bring back Bogosian. You can sign Eric Chernak, and you don't have to get rid of those valuable depth guys. So I think the reason you get rid of them is because you know that you can do it without them. And you don't know necessarily if you can do it without those second, third, fourth liners and then those right shot defensemen. You just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just an example of a trade that looks really bad in terms of optics if it doesn't work out. I just think a bold move like this, if it doesn't work out, this is the type of trade that gets you fired. And I think they'd have to get a huge return, although you're right, they could theoretically re-sign some of those third line, not even third line, but more depth guys down the second, third, fourth lines. They could lock up more of those guys. But yeah, I think shipping out Stamkos would kind of be hitting the panic button when this team still has a lot to offer.
Well, I just don't think it would be hitting the panic button because I think you have a real problem with the salary cap, and so it sort of feels like a necessary. To me, it seems like a necessary move to keep the roster intact. Because okay, you keep Stamkos, and then you sign Sorelli and Sergachev, and then you don't have any right defensemen for next year. I mean, I suppose you could bring up Cal Foote and Alex Green, who are the young guys, and just I mean, you can hope that they step in. I guess there's no reason that they're not going to, but I just don't think it just doesn't seem like a panic move. I'm not trying to trade Stamkos because they're not able to win the playoffs. I think that it's solely a logistical trade. He carries a big salary hit, and trading him would free up the ability to keep some of these guys that are proven to be impactful players. I mean, Alex Killorn had 26 goals this year. He had 26 goals on the second line. He got power play time in the first unit, and he provides a little bit of what word am I looking for? Growl, snarl. I don't know words. I just don't see, like, yes, I always think that you could acquire depth players. You could acquire guys that are fast, that but you can also get guys that you think are going to fill those roles and then just don't end up doing it. And you have the guys that are capable of bringing you to a Stanley Cup. And I don't see, well, I guess I don't really see all that much benefit in bringing Stamkos back, hoping he can stay healthy, because that could be a little bit of an issue with Stamkos. I mean, what's his number doing right now? It's just draining the team. He's not out there. I mean, and he's been an injury-plagued guy. So for me, it makes all the sense in the world to trade him.
You know what this reminds me of, though, is it reminds me of Joe Thornton in the playoffs the year before he got traded, or maybe it was 2 years before. He played very injured, didn't produce. People had a bad taste in their mouth about Joe Thornton then because of that. And even though he was their star, they felt the need to do something more bold than they probably did have to do. Traded Thornton for, I think it was Marco Sturm and a couple other small pieces. And then that very year, he ended up winning the Hart Trophy as league MVP in San Jose. And the GM, Mike O'Connell, who traded him, ended up getting fired before the season even ended. So to me, I just see too much of that Joe Thornton trade in potentially trading Stamkos.
But I don't think you could compare the 05-06 Bruins to the Lightning right now. I don't think that's a comparison at all. I mean, Tampa's been around the block a few times, and like you said with this stat on Cooper, what was it before this year? He went to the conference finals 3 times. I mean,
So
that's
before
not just
this year,
Stamkos.
this is his 4th time making it past the second round. So 3 times before this, he's made it past round 2.
Yeah. So I mean, these guys have been around the block. I mean, the Bruins, it was like, yeah, he struggled, but that was almost. I felt like that was just a shake up of the deck, and that was a huge risk because you didn't know what you had without him. And I think that this playoffs, I've said it a few times, this playoffs you could see what you got without Stamkos, and it's a team that can compete for the Stanley Cup. I mean, the Bruins won the President's Trophy, and they dismantled the Bruins. It wasn't even close. They dismantled them. And it just seems almost like, I mean, and you said that trading your star. At this point, I don't think Stamkos is your star. I think if you got him in the lineup, he's your 4th best player. I mean, he's not better than Point, he's not better than Kucherov, and he's not better than Victor Hedman, even though Victor Hedman's a defenseman. So he's getting superstar money, but well, no, I shouldn't say he's getting superstar money. 8.5. That's a pretty penny, but it's not the 11s of the world. So, but it's a ton to free up. You don't need him for the star power because of the guys I just mentioned. I just think that I honestly think the safer move is to get rid of him. I really do.
That's a hot take. The safer move is to get rid of Steven Stamkos, but
Yeah.
in this unique situation, I do understand why it would apply there.
it's just, I mean, to me, it's just such a risk to get rid of the guys who have showed up this playoffs and are really, really making it difficult to play against. Obviously, this will all of this whole conversation could throw it out the window if they end up losing this series to the Islanders. Then it's, oh geez, this team really sort of can't get it done if they blow a 3-1 lead. But I guess it's a big assumption that they'll take care of business. And if that's the case, then I definitely feel like the safer move is just bring all these guys back. It's like the Chiefs, they're saying this year is just run it back. Just run it back. That's what I think. That's what I think Tampa should do next year, because they might not have 128 points or 124, whatever they got in last year, but come the playoffs, come the spring, whatever the hell the playoffs are going to be, they're going to be a difficult team to play against, and I think that it's because of those. It's because of those Kevin Shattenkirk bringing out the puck, because of
Yeah,
Johnson's speed all over the place, Blake Coleman, Johnny Gord, Barkley Goodrow just being pains in the asses to play against. And I think that's what we talked about with Dallas. That's the reason why Tampa is so good. And I think it goes beyond their star power. So switching gears to the team that Tampa beat in the second round of the playoffs, the Boston Bruins. As mentioned at the top of the show, Bruce Cassidy was named the Jack Adams winner for the Coach of the Year. Real quickly, Dylan, do you think he was the right choice?
yeah, I like it. I know there's been some controversy over it, and I particularly see an argument for John Tortorella. I had a feeling it would be one of those two before the finalists were even announced. But yeah, for Cassidy, I know some people look at that and say it's just the best team, but yeah, I mean it's also been pretty consistent. The Bruins have been a real big threat in the last 3 years, really, and Cassidy took over the team at a time where they were starting to fail under Claude Julien. They missed the playoffs a couple years. I think it was 2015 and 2016 they missed the playoffs. So that's obviously not ideal for Boston sports. It's not something that Boston sports fans are used to dealing with. And then Bruce Cassidy comes in, and everything for the most part has clicked really well since he took over the team in, what was it, 2017? Was that it? End of 2016?
I
But
believe, yeah, 16, 17, I think. Yeah,
I think it
they
was
played in the
16,
yeah they played in
17.
the winter Classic in 16, and Julian was still a coach.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
I think he
So
got fired after Julian got fired after that.
that's
We made the
right. Yeah. So
playoffs,
it
so
was the beginning of the 2016-17 season. It was his first year as a head coach in Boston, and he's just worked his way up the ladder. He's had a long minor league coaching career. Uh, Coached several years in the ECHL, the IHL, the AHL. Head coach of the Capitals for a couple of years in the early 2000s. Assistant in Chicago. Coached in Providence for a while in the American League for the Bruins, and now here he is finally getting his crack as a real consistent full-time NHL head coach that has been back for multiple seasons, and he's posted a 161, 66, and 34 record. So even if you add together the overtime and regulation losses, he's 161 and 100. So to me, that's, you put that in with making the playoffs all 4 years, and that this is also one of the most well-rounded teams and organization in hockey. It's like, to me, at a certain point, you just got to ask, what more can the guy do? And yeah, I think in this case, Bruce Cassidy earned it.
yeah, I want to avoid these awards being lifetime achievement awards, and that's what it kind of feels like with Cassidy. To me, it was obviously John Tortorella. I mean, just looking at the guys that they lost on July 1st of last year, you lose Panarin, you lose Bobrovsky, you lose Matthew Shane, you lose Ryan Dzingel. I mean, that's a core of a team that just walked out the door, and you didn't replace the star power really. You just built from within, and they were in the exact same position they were a year ago. So that's, to me, is complete credit to the coach. I mean, it was sort of like people were saying, you know exactly what you're going to get with Toronto, not Toronto, against Toronto. The people in Toronto were saying, you know exactly what you're going to get when you face Columbus. They're going to breathe down your neck. They're going to forecheck the crap out of you. And to me, that is a all the credit in the world goes to the coach. So I'd give it to Tortorella, but I guess I'm not upset that Cassidy won. I think that he did a good job this year. I think he's done a great job with the Bruins, like you said. I mean, he has. I mean, they were in a bad spot when he took over, and they haven't missed the playoffs since taking over. But I want to talk a little bit more about sort of their future going forward. There was a really interesting piece in The Athletic. It was called "We Have to Be as Brutally Honest as Possible: Graying Bruins Face Leaner Years." And a quote from Cam Neely. "We've got some guys that have played a lot of good hockey for us, a lot of years for us, and their careers are somewhat winding down," President Cam Neely said. "We have to really take a hard look at where we're at as an organization. Can we compete again for the Stanley Cup? If we can, what do we have to do to our roster to do that? So we really have to be honest with ourselves in assessing our team, assessing our players, and the organization, seeing where we think we really are going to be. We have to be as brutally honest as possible about where we think we're going to be in the next couple of years. We have to react accordingly to that." So that quote sort of caught me a little bit by surprise, because that's sort of admitting that the cup window could be shut. That this is a real sense of urgency that it feels like. It's like they won the President's Trophy last year. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals the year before that, and now it's sort of like we got to address that our players are getting older, that everything sort of could be winding down, and how they're going to be in the next couple of years. I don't necessarily think they're wrong, but it just sort of was a little bit alarming to hear that, or to read that rather, from Neely. It is a very honest quote. He's being brutally honest by saying that, for sure.
Neely, when he says that, he definitely doesn't sound like a typical man in the front office of an NHL organization. Whether it's a GM, president, coach, whatever, they're typically overwhelmingly positive, even if they don't necessarily believe it. A GM, president, whatever, they're always going to say, "Oh, we might not be where we want to be, but this team has some pieces that we think can come together very soon, and we're real excited for our fans, and we have a bright future," and all that good stuff that they always use as cliches. But in this case, no, it's unconventional for Neely to just come right out and say something like that and admit that this organization has to take a look in the mirror and consider taking a step back and making some moves more so based off of the future of the team as opposed to the cup window they have now. And in Boston sports, I know I've mentioned this before, but this isn't something the fans typically deal too well with. They don't like the idea of not being contenders at all. And I think it's very interesting to see that from any GM in the league or any president. But yeah, I think he said what really everyone's thinking. It's just it's a matter of the fact that he did say it, and that's what you typically don't hear. You just hear overwhelming positivity, but I guess you gotta take it for what it's worth. He's just being honest.
Yeah, I don't think that this is necessarily him saying that they're gonna sort of rebuild, I guess, if you will. I think it's
No,
sort of
I wouldn't say that either.
I would say that this is more of a sense that they're going for it, and that they know that they only got a few more years left, but they're gonna try to win the cup again. And him saying this, him sort of going for the cup, I think it's an inclination that Torrey Krug is out of town. I really do. I think that Torrey Krug is going to demand a lot of money on the free agent market with their current salary cap at 14.4, and if they sign Torrey Krug, you only got a certain amount of money. You have to re-sign Jake DeBrusk and Matt Grzelcyk, who are both RFAs, and so it would sort of seem like what they would do what I want Tampa to do, which is just bring the whole squad back for another year. And I think this quote is just sort of an indication that they're not going to do that.
It's almost like he's trying to break it to the fan base slowly and just kind of plant the idea first, and then it'll grow as a reality as time goes on, and people will come to terms with the fact that in professional sports, this is the way it goes. You can't keep a team of this caliber together forever, and it comes with some collateral damage. It comes with some headaches if you want to really have a successful team year after year, and sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do, but that's just the nature of a sport that's as competitive as the NHL. And
Yeah,
also, yeah, regarding Krug, I think he's gone. I hate to say it, I love Krug. He's one of my favorite players in the league, honestly. I love the way he plays. I love the way he presents himself, and he's exciting. But I just look at him and I realize that Thomas Chabot and Jacob Trouba, they both signed for $8 million, and I think Krug is a step above them. And I'm not sure. I mean, the Bruins could squeeze out that $8 million, but are there better options available? Is the real question. And I think there are definitely some options that are at least worth exploring. And I think in a sense, I think they can survive without Torrey Krug. He's a great asset, but I think the Bruins have some other needs that they should look into.
yeah, definitely they have some other needs, and then I think they don't have a lot of other needs, I would say. But the issues that they have are glaring, and they're exposed in the playoffs, and they're the reason they don't win in the playoffs.
Yeah,
Middle six, their middle six was, I mean, their third line last year was great. It was the best line that they had, but the second line didn't do anything. The first line couldn't score against physical defenses, and then this year it was sort of, it was almost a little bit flipped in that the first line still struggled against physical defenses in that Tampa series, but they did great against Carolina, and I thought Brad Marchand was great against Tampa. But their second line again didn't do anything, and their third line was a joke. I mean, the third line was terrible. So it's like you can't just bring all those guys back, make a trade at the trade deadline, and hope that they explode, because I don't think that's going to happen. And so I think that filling those holes has to come at, unfortunately for Torrey Krug's time in Boston, because it's been great. I think it's got to come at his expense, and you need to get middle six. You need to be able to get somebody that can score against physical teams. He doesn't have to light up the scoreboard. Doesn't have to get 35, 40 goals a year, but a guy, a guy like Nathan Horton. I mean, obviously that's so much easier said than done, but just guy like the people in Dallas, the guys against Dallas that get goals when the money is on the table. And the Bruins don't have that. I mean, in the last four, here's a stat. In the last four playoff series, the Bruins have lost. They've played in 8 overtime games. They've lost 7 of them. The playoffs are so close. They're so close that it comes down to a puck bounce going the way, some guy making a play. And right now, the Bruins don't have those guys. They just don't. And I don't know how they're going to get them if they re-sign Krug. And in the year that the Bruins won the Stanley Cup in 2011, they went 4-1 in overtime games in the playoffs, and that includes 3 in the first round. If you think back to that series, that was an absolute dogfight against Montreal.
yeah.
They got down 0-2, and it was like they could have folded, but they just made 1 or 2 or 3 more plays than the Canadians did, and it was the difference in winning a Stanley Cup. I mean, the 1-7 mark, they lost 2 games to Tampa this year. You flip one of those, it's a longer series. I definitely not thinking the Bruins would win the series, but again, in the first series under Cassidy, when they lost to Ottawa, they lost 3 overtime games. So it's like these overtime games flip series, and the Bruins do not have enough guys that make plays in the crunch time of the game, because a lot of their guys are they just even out. They play against good physical teams. They don't allow a whole lot of goals, and they just play 0-0 hockey. And frankly, that's not going to get it done, and it's just wasting the age of the core even more.
Yeah, this is probably the end of Torrey Krug in a Bruins uniform, but they got a lot of good years out of him at reasonable prices, and he wasn't even drafted. They got him as a college free agent, and yeah, had a lot of success with him. So there really hasn't been much that Torrey Krug can control that hasn't gone right since he's been here. Unfortunately, they haven't won a cup, but he's definitely done his part, and I think he should, or at least he deserves a good legacy in Boston, no matter
For
what
sure,
happens.
yeah. I mean, Torrey Krug, uh, he's been, and I would, if money wasn't an issue and you could sign whoever you wanted and pay them however much you want, you should do everything in your power to keep this guy. I mean, when you got Krug out there and he's playing with a stay-at-home defenseman, whether it was Carlo this year, a year before that Kevin Miller, they created unbelievable second line. They're just so good. And when you got McAvoy on the top line, and then before McAvoy it was just Chara and I don't know what the hell he played with, Seidenberg. I mean, that's unreal top two. That's why Dallas is in the finals on their depth scoring that the Bruins don't have, and their top two defensive players. And that's why the Bruins made it last year. And Krug and Carlo had a really bad playoff, which was this past year, which was uncharacteristic for them. But together they have been a dominant number two, and honestly they've been one of the best lines defensive pairings in the NHL. So that's a reason to keep them. And then obviously on the power play, I mean that's been the Bruins' strength the past 3 years has been the power play, and Krug's been the quarterback. So when you're dishing out dimes to Pastrnak and Marchand on the wings, that's a hard power play to stop. And like the second power play, like the second defensive pairing, that power play brought you to the finals too. So
Yeah.
are they going to take a huge hit? I think so. I don't know how far the power play is going to dip without him. I think Grizzlick will be okay, but if he does walk, they have a big hole on defense in the top four, particularly because I don't think an aging Chara and McAvoy, along with Grizzlick and Carlo, is going to be anywhere near good enough to win the cup. So I think you're going to have to make another move and somehow get a left shot defenseman.
Krug is just the perfect power play
Totally
setup,
perfect.
man. I mean, he's just so shifty. He has a quick shot, whether it's slap shot, wrist shot, either one. But his feet move so quick, and when he's doing those quick crossovers at the blue line, moving laterally side to side, I always love watching not just him, but any NHL defenseman. You know how quickly their feet move and how quickly they can move in terms of agility. That's really Krug's thing. He just moves his feet on the power play, gets open, finds the open ice, and he'll shoot it, pass it, whatever. He'll set people up, but regardless, he's a huge asset to have on your power play, and I think the Bruins will definitely miss that.
So we're going to shift gears. We're going to do a snake draft. So free agency is coming up soon, and that can lead to guys going to new teams and looking a little weird in their new jerseys. Tom Brady played his first game in a Buccaneers uniform last Sunday. Qualify. So we're going to do it for hockey. We're going to do it for the NHL. Guys who look a little silly in their new uniforms. Dylan, I'll be a nice guy. You can have your first selection.
So my first pick of the Puck Buds all rentable draft is none other than Peter Forsberg on the Nashville Predators. He played a bit in Philadelphia as well. Obviously, people think of him as a member of the Colorado Avalanche, even the Quebec Nordiques, because he did play 1 year for them before they moved. And yeah, I mean, he's Hall of Famer, legend of the game, but people don't picture him much outside of Colorado. He did play in Philadelphia after the lockout in the 05-06 season, played one full season there, played the next full season in Philadelphia as captain, and then was traded to Nashville as a rental for the end of the 2007 season. Played 17 games in Predators yellow. Definitely a lot different than seeing him in the typical blue and what would you call it, a maroon purple color for Colorado. And then
Some ugly color,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a weird,
It's
unique
ugly.
shade
It's
for sure.
bad. It's bad
But after
uniform.
he played those 17 games in Nashville, he did finish his career in Colorado by playing 9 games for them the following season, just as kind of a last hurrah type thing.
Interesting. Solid pick. I'm taking two guys because they played for the same team. I'm cheating. So by the way, yeah, I'll do what I want. I'm taking Keith Kachuk and Chris Chelios for the Atlanta Thrashers. Atlanta Thrashers. Keith Tkachuk was traded from the St. Louis Blues, which is where he made his name, to Atlanta in 2006, and he sort of made it known that he was going to go back to St. Louis after the deal. Atlanta still made it, and after they lost in the first round to the Rangers, Keith Tkachuk kept his word and went back to St. Louis. So the other one is Chris Chelios. So most people remember his successful career in Montreal, Chicago, and then Detroit. His career in 2009, 2010 with Atlanta, he played 7 games. I didn't know that. I knew about Keith Tkachuk, but I had no idea that Chris Chelios played 7 games in 2009,
7 games. How
2010.
about that?
Yeah, well, a lot of these guys have play like 2 games.
Yeah.
So, speaking of lower number of games, my second pick is Jerome McGinley. Now, a lot of times, I said Jerome McGinley, weird jerseys. I think people would be like, "Oh, Colorado." No, Los Angeles in 2016, 2017, 19 games played, and he had 9 points. That's not so bad. I saw this one. I remember. I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, that's right." Jerome McGinley, LA King for 19 games.
Yeah. I think he wore number 88 for that stint too, which I thought was pretty funny.
You're right. Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely a trip right there. It's just he played so long in Calgary, and then he had those little stops just like Yager did, and it was just confusing. It felt very strange seeing him in those different uniforms.
Yeah. Of
You know, he
course,
was
with the
drafted by Dallas.
I did. I did know that.
Yeah, he never played for them. I think he got traded after one training camp while he was still in the WHL. But yeah, so that's another one is you can find a picture of him in a Stars uniform at his draft with the jersey over him and everything. That stuff just looks so weird with guys that we're so used to seeing in one particular uniform.
Yeah. No doubt
Yeah.
about it.
So is it my turn or
Oh,
yours?
yours. So
Okay.
you go for 2.
So the next one I have up is Martin St. Louis for the Calgary
Oh
Flames.
God. I just gotta.
You got that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, you can think of another one real quick while I'm going on about Marty, but he started his NCAA career at the University of Vermont, and he was teammates with Tim Thomas there. Little similarity, both of them were on those teams, and both of them went undrafted, and both of them went on to win Stanley Cups. So it's funny how that works. It's a quick reminder that when these kids get drafted, a lot of them are still 18 years old, so there's a lot of maturing to do, both physically and mentally, before they make it to their highest level, before they reach their full potential. So you never know what's going to happen with 18-year-old kids, whether they do or don't get drafted. St. Louis and Tim Thomas are perfect examples of that. But yeah, he played in the IHL briefly after playing at the University of Vermont, graduating in '97. And after 56 games in the IHL, he was picked up by Calgary, played a few years split between the minor league St. John's Flames and Flames in the NHL. And yeah, coming in 2001, he found his way. I'm sorry, 2000, he made his way over to Tampa, where he played the majority of his career. But yeah, to start his career out, he did spend parts of 2 seasons on the Calgary Flames.
The one that's a little. It might not qualify per se. I guess it's not that weird, but I feel like it's not talked about enough. So, and for it being a rental draft, I feel like it's a pretty good pick. That's Brad Richards on the Blackhawks. So Richards is
Okay.
a guy who gets a little bit forgotten, I feel like. Right? Maybe he doesn't. I just sort of feel like he does. So 932 points in 1,126 games played. He's been in the
Wow.
conference finals 5 times. And he's been to the cup 3 times on 3 different teams, which that's a pretty good feat too. And the conference finals was with 4 different teams. So obviously most people remember him on Tampa Bay, wherein he won the Conn Smythe. He played for a cup of coffee in Dallas. And by cup of coffee, I mean like 3 years. Um, and then he got traded to the Rangers or signed with the Rangers, whichever it was. Went to the conference finals twice, went to the Stanley Cup once. And then it was Chicago. And maybe people remember it because he was the primary assist on the Patrick Kane goal in Game 6, which put the Blackhawks ahead, buried Tampa. But in that run, towards the end of his career, so it was in 2014, 2015, obviously. 23 games played, 11 goals, 3 goals, 11 assists, 14 points. That's pretty good for a guy that was clearly on the tail end of his career. So Brad Richards on Chicago, he'll always have that all-time highlight, but yeah, it's interesting. A former Conn Smythe winner wins another Stanley Cup in his one season of action with the Blackhawks.
Yeah, that's a nice place to end up for a year or two at the end of your career, just in Chicago during their prime. That must have been awesome.
Making some feeds to Patty Kane. Yeah.
Yeah, jump along
Yeah.
for the ride.
Yep. Well,
But
I mean,
so
hey, 14 points in 23 games, not really along for the ride.
yeah, and I gotta say, when you read his career stats out loud, I didn't realize he was that close to a point a game. I didn't realize it's funny because you were just saying how people kind of overlook him. Well, I think in a way I'm kind of one of those people because I had no idea he had that close to 1,000 points.
Well, speaking of the Richards last name, another guy who people really overlook a lot is Mike Richards, too.
Yeah, that's true. He won some cups in LA, didn't he?
Yep. Yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
for sure.
But a lot of guys, I mean, some of those 2000s to early 2010 guys get overlooked. I mean, Richards was Mike Richards was out of the NHL by when he was 30, but I mean, still, he was 349 points at 453 games.
Wow.
So another guy that's really, really overlooked. So
Wow.
the Richards not bros, two overlooked guys.
Yeah. So next on my list, I have this one's it reminds me of Babe Ruth in Boston, just an absolute legend of the game, idolized, and then goes to play somewhere else. It's Guy Lafleur on the New York Rangers. And yeah. Guy Lafleur, I mean, that's a Montreal Canadiens name. They're the French team of the NHL. It's been that way since the early part of the 20th century when there was 2 teams in Montreal, the Montreal Maroons and the Montreal Canadiens, obviously. The Canadiens were the French team, the Maroons were the English team. Eventually, the Maroons folded, and you were just left with the Canadiens. And since then, they've just been the team of Quebec, the team of French pride, you could say. And yeah, Guy Lafleur was there for, he was there for 14 years. In total for the Montreal Canadiens, he was there for 14 years. Had a huge legacy, was part of, how many? Close to 10 Stanley Cup teams. And yeah, obviously cemented his legacy as a member of those dynasty Montreal Canadiens with Ken Dryden between the pipes, Guy Lapointe. Obviously, that's one of the greatest teams ever assembled. And then you see him in a New York Rangers jersey for that 1988-89 season, and it's just it's really a tough thing to comprehend.
Well, I said all my guys. I guess I'll say Jaromir Jagr in every single uniform ever. I mean, Dallas.
I thought about saying the
exact
same thing.
Dallas is really bizarre. The fact that he played for Dallas. Florida's weird too. The Bruins is really weird. Yeah, I mean, but him being on Dallas, he's got his streak of 40 straight Stanley Cup Finals where one of his teammates has played stays alive.
Oh, that's insane. I saw that just the other day, and it took me a second to comprehend it. But so it starts in 1980, and now we're in 2020, obviously. So that includes a list of guys who played in the NHL and won cups before he was in the league, but then they were eventually teammates with him. So it took me a bit to comprehend that, but that is a ridiculous stat. And I bet it was Elias Sports Bureau that found that. They're the best with those quirky little stats.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, he went to Russia for like 5 minutes too, right in the middle of his career.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Even I forget about that sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, he was one of the big names that headed, really of all time, to head over to Russia in the middle of his career, or to any other league for that matter.
Yeah, absolute legend.
So finishing off the snake draft, I have Paul Coffey suiting up for the Boston Bruins. This is one where it really makes you think, geez, the Bruins had Coffey and Yager as rentals.
Yeah.
Maybe the Bruins are the all-time all-rental team. But yeah, he won all those cups with Edmonton, was part of that dynasty. Messier, Gretzky, Curry, Fier, and then Coffey on defense. It's just that's definitely up there as well for one of the greatest teams ever assembled. And yeah, he did
Totally.
play 18 games for Boston in his final season. They were his last 18 games in the NHL. It was the 2000-2001 season. This came after playing in Carolina and Chicago for a few years. But yeah, most of his career was in Edmonton. Also played in Pittsburgh for a little while, which is where some other people know him because he was on, I believe, one of their cup teams as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, he was. He was his first year. Second to last year in Pittsburgh. Did play those 18 games in Boston, which isn't what people associate him with, but maybe, like I said, maybe the Bruins are the all-rental team of the NHL.
I gotta call you out, Dylan. Like a month ago, we're in the hockey group chat. He goes, I got a trivia question. Statistically wise, who's the greatest player in Bruins history? I'm like, I don't know, Bobby Orr. It's like, no. I'm like, Ray Bork. It's like, not him. Paul Coffey. It's like, yeah, he's the Bruins defenseman is who I think of when I think of Paul Coffey.
The Bruins defensive system still revolves around Paul Coffey's play in those 18 games.
Yeah, exactly. The whole franchise. His numbers. I must have missed his jersey hanging from the rafters last time I was at the Garden.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here. You heard it here first. That's an absolute guarantee is that you heard it here first that Paul Coffey is the greatest Spurs defenseman of all time.
And don't call that a hot take because, hey, you just word it the right way and it is statistically true. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Oh yeah, no. Only facts here on this program.
Absolutely.
So with Dallas in the finals, Miro Heiskanen, Jamie Benn, Dennis Gurianov could all be possibilities to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. But what about Conn Smythe himself? Who was this guy? Here's a little history lesson.
Yeah, so everyone knows what the Conn Smythe Trophy is. It goes to the playoff MVP. It's been awarded since, I believe, the mid-'60s. And, every hockey fan is familiar with that, but very few people know a thing or two about Conn Smythe, the person. So today we're going to go over who he really was. So Constantine Smythe, that's his full name, but we'll call him Conn. Conn Smythe was born in Toronto in 1895 after his family immigrated from Northern Ireland. The family struggled financially and moved around Ontario several times, and his mom died in 1906 when he was 11 after years of being an alcoholic, and at that point, Conn then swore off alcohol for the remainder of his life, which to all accounts he kept up with. So he enrolled in the University of Toronto's engineering program in 1912 at 17 years old. While at the University of Toronto, he was captain of the hockey team, and they won the OHA championship in 1915. 1 week after winning the championship, Smythe and 8 of his University of Toronto teammates voluntarily enlisted into the Canadian military to join the fight in World War I. There was no military draft in Canada. They did have a program like they do in countries like Finland, where you get drafted for mandatory service where you learn how to shoot a gun and basic military tactics, but you couldn't get drafted to go overseas. This was all in-country training. But no, Smythe and his teammates, they volunteered to go straight overseas and join the fight. So Smythe was originally sent to the Royal School of Artillery in Kingston, Ontario, and was later assigned to the 40th Battery of Hamilton as he went overseas to begin fighting in World War I. He was initially stationed in Ypres while fighting in Belgium, and all of his superiors were killed, so he became commander at age 21. And he earned the Military Cross in 1917 when he killed 3 Germans during an encirclement, which allowed him to bring 4 of his own men back to safety. He was later transferred to the Royal Flying Corps as an observer, which is more or less the Air Force, and his plane was shot down by Germans while observing the front line. He survived, but he was a prisoner of war until the war ended on November 11th, 1918. So at the young age of 21, he was in German captivity. But like I said, when the war ended, he did return to Canada alive. So when he returned to Canada, he became the head coach at the University of Toronto, his alma mater. And after several winning seasons, the Rangers hired him as GM, but he was quickly replaced by Lester Patrick. And in 1927, however, Smythe purchased a $10,000 stake in the Toronto St. Pats after making a fortune off sports betting. So he purchases a share in the Toronto St. Pats and is eventually named GM for the start of the following season because, again, he has had a lot of success coaching at the University of Toronto. He eventually became majority owner and at one point was coach, GM, and majority owner of the Maple Leafs. He owned the Leafs up until 1961, 34 years after his initial investment, and he really rebuilt the franchise from the top down. The first thing he did was he changed the name to the Maple Leafs, and he changed the colors to blue and white. They were originally green and white when they were the St. Pats. He was also responsible for the creation of Maple Leaf Gardens, which he always thought was a huge necessity. The prior arena only held 7,500 people, and Maple Leaf Gardens held pretty much exactly double that, about 15,000. So Maple Leafs Gardens was finished in 1931, and for that whole season leading up to that, Smythe resigned from his coaching duties just to focus on construction. So as you can see, this is one of the most multi-talented guys you could ever meet. And during his entire tenure, from 1927 to 1962, the Maple Leafs had won 8 out of their 13 Stanley Cups. So 8 Stanley Cups during his tenure with the Maple Leafs, partnership, whatever you want to call it. And outside of those 8 cups, the Maple Leafs have only won 5. And as we know, they haven't won a cup since 1967. So it seems like they really needed Conn Smythe and still need Conn Smythe if they want to win Stanley Cups, because that's the only thing that works for them. Anyway, so we're going back to his service in the military here. So this is while GM and owner of the Maple Leafs. After already serving in World War I, Smythe voluntarily enlisted to the Canadian military once again in 1941 to join World War II. So again, this is while he was still owner of the Maple Leafs. And he was initially sent to France in July of 1944, just weeks after D-Day, and was severely wounded by a German air raid when the Luftwaffe bombed an Allied ammunition depot. Really what happened was Smythe's entire lower body got torn up by shrapnel. And it was unlikely that he would walk, but luckily for him, he was able to regain his stability and did end up walking for the rest of his life, although with a very noticeable limp. So he came back from World War II, now having served in both World Wars, POW, severely wounded in World War II, and he's just going back to business, and he's going to be the owner and GM of the Leafs. So the Leafs once again won the Stanley Cup in 1947 and would go on to win 5 more times during his tenure. They even won one while he was at war, and he wasn't present, but his name still ended up on the Stanley Cup. So you take in all this and you realize that Conn Smythe is definitely not only a huge innovator of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but a huge part of the history of the NHL in general because he put the team in the world's biggest hockey market back on the map. The Toronto Maple Leafs are a dynasty today, not necessarily a winning dynasty, but a dynasty nonetheless. They're known all over North America, all over the world, maybe not all over, but, very well known. And Conn Smythe is a big part of building up that legacy that the Toronto Maple Leafs have today.
Yeah, I mean, the Leafs haven't been the same without him. And that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they won 8 of their 13 Stanley Cups during his run. So they have a real tough time winning it when he's not there. And even the ones they won in the late 60s, those were with the teams he built. So really, he's been a part of probably really 10 or 11 of them.
So we're nearing the end of this episode. Got anything else, Dylan, before we wrap it up?
I'm real excited about the draft. I heard about that just yesterday, and that's one of my favorite days of the year. I often tell people that as a hockey nerd, you could say some of my favorite days of the year happen off the ice. I love July 1st, which this year is going to be a different day, but I love free agency, big trades, the draft, all that. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the draft on October 6th.
You got any sleepers?
Sleepers in the draft?
Yeah.
Um,
I don't want to
Man,
put you
I
on the
don't know.
spot.
It seems
I
like
don't
it's
want to
going to
put you
be
on
a
the spot
deep
like that.
draft. They're saying this is going to be one of the best ones ever. We've heard that before. I mean, who knows what we got to take that with a grain of salt. You can't put too much stock into any draft, but yeah, I mean, they're saying this will be a good one. I can't really give you any sleepers, but yeah, hopefully this will be a deep one.
And also, when we were recording, just want to touch on this just briefly. Won't go too into depth. Marcus Johansson was traded from Buffalo to the Minnesota Wild for Eric Stahl. My first thought on this deal was why. I think both these guys are older players that push the team over the top. Not, I shouldn't say old. I mean veteran players that push a Stanley Cup team over the top. And neither Minnesota or Buffalo is close to competing for a cup. So don't really get it, but I don't know. That's just my initial reaction. I think both are pretty good players. I mean, I mean, Johansson was awesome on the Bruins third line last year, and Stahl has been a really underrated player throughout his career. So I think they're both good players. I just don't really understand why the deal was made.
These are two teams that have been caught in mediocrity for a while, and I think in the Sabres case, saying that they're mediocre is a compliment. I think they're. I mean, we could go on for days about the mess that is the Buffalo Sabres, whether it's the roster, management, coaching, you name it. But I'll need to take some time to really formulate an opinion about this one. But yeah, for Buffalo, I don't really get it. I think they're a team that needs assets more than they need guys who are kind of winding down. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll really take me some time to form an opinion on this one. But for now, I kind of don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Well, this far into the episode, make sure to check out our next episode, and thanks for listening. That's all I got.